All right, everybody. Welcome to this edition of The People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator of this special edition of The People Show. I had to come on tonight to talk about the Illinois State Supreme Court. Pulled a fast one on us on Ed Burke. Ed Burke, of course, who is the ex-alderman of the 14th Ward. He gets to keep his law license because the Illinois Supreme Court fails to act on the petition from the ARDC, which is the Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission. You all know that Ed Burke is the former alderman convicted last year of racketeering, bribery, and attempted extortion. Has been allowed to keep his law license after the majority of the state Supreme Court. There's only 7 justices that sit on the Illinois State Supreme Court. On the United States Supreme Court, there are 9. So 4 of them recused themselves from taking up the issue, and of course, the court spokesman dropped that on Monday. Now, I was looking to see if this was actually going to make the news. Maybe it made the mainstream news, but I did not see it. I was looking to see it. I saw it was first broke, of course, on Newsbreak. But this is the Chicago Tribune's article that dropped it this morning. So the Attorney Registration Disciplinary Committee had filed a petition. For the interim suspension of Burke's license after he was convicted of 13 of the 14 federal corruption counts in December. A February 2nd order from the Illinois State Supreme Court indicates that the court was unable to reach a quorum to make a decision on the suspension, meaning that at least 4 of the 7 justices recuse themselves. So therefore, there could not be a majority. There could not be a quorum. The recusal means that Burke will be allowed to keep his law license for the time being. Maybe they will bring this back up again. The Sun-Times and WBEZ first reported this on the court's actions. The former alderman's wife, Ann Burke, was previously on the Supreme Court and served as the Chief Justice for 3 years, ending in 2022. And of course, appointed Joy Cunningham, who is running for election in that seat. And I got my opinions about that. And I think that we should, as voters, we should take some actions on that. I'll be talking more about that in just a few minutes. Not clear which members of the Supreme Court recused themselves. Of course, we won't know what that is. I was looking to see if, in fact, they would be listed in the Daily Law Bulletin, which came out today. And I still have not been able to read that paper or get that information to find out whether or not they were listed. But I doubt very seriously that they were listed, because they could recuse themselves because they didn't hear it. So by them not hearing it, or deciding not to take it up, they do the recusals in secret. So now typically, when judges recuse themselves, certainly on the lower level, we know who it is that's recusing themselves. And even at the Supreme Court, if they hear a case, if the majority of the justices did not recuse themselves, they could still hear the case, but they still have to have a majority of the justices in order to have a decision one way or the other, or if they're going to have a different outcome. We had that problem back in 2015 with the red light camera case, when it was argued before the Supreme Court on the legality of the enforcement of red light cameras, because the city instituted red light cameras when they had not been given approval to do so by the Illinois General Assembly. They had only been given approval to look at the measure, but not to implement them. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. There was a comment from the appellate court judge, Jesse Reyes, who is running for Justice Ann Burke's seat, the former seat against the replacement that she appointed on Monday, said that the lack of a decision exposes a long-standing conflict in our judiciary. Convicted felons should not be practicing law in the state, period. That's what Jesse Reyes' comment was related to this story. I think that this is such an egregious move by the Illinois Supreme Court, but I think that it is another layer that shows to us as voters, as citizens, that our judiciary is not impartial, that it is highly politicized, that we have a tax cheat on the Illinois Supreme Court in Justice Scott P. Scott Neville, who should not be there in the first place. Justice P. Scott Neville was picked by the other justices to finish the term of the retiring Justice or Chief Justice Charles Freeman. Chief Justice Charles Freeman had selected Cynthia Cobbs to be his replacement, who served as his law clerk. She also served as the administrator of running the Illinois Supreme Court. And he selected her, and the other justices decided to break with the long-standing tradition for the first time in Illinois history, not to respect and honor a retiring Supreme Court justice's choice to replace them for the remainder of their term. They then picked P. Scott Neville, who, in my opinion, should never be on the Supreme Court. He's not that sharp, he's not that bright, and he's a tax cheat. This is the guy who took many, many years of a homestead exemption on his deceased mother's home. I think many years. I can't remember what the number of years was, but it was many years. They gave him a pass, and when it was discovered, he paid the money back, so they gave him a pass. But this is a person who served as a on the court, as an officer on the court, who was a tax cheat. So I believe that he has no business being on the Supreme Court. And now we have Joy Cunningham. I don't even know who she is. Met her one time, and she's running because she has to run for election. I think that we need to make a protest statement, and that we need to send a message to all of these elected officials. We need to send a message to them that we are, as voters, are not going to stand for this. How in the world is a federally convicted felon in Ed Burke? His wife, Ann Burke, is no longer serving on the Supreme Court. She served as the Chief Justice, and that ended for 3 years, which ended in 2022. So how is it that he gets to stay on the court? He gets to stay on the court, or not on the court, but he continues to practice law. He's allowed to practice law. He's allowed to keep his license when every other person who has a law license that's been convicted of a crime, that they are immediately disbarred from practicing law. So we have a criminally convicted felon who will be practicing law in the courts of Cook County, the state of Illinois. Now, his main bread winning is doing tax appeals before the Board of Review. So he will be, here is this convicted corrupt lawyer who maintains his license, that is going to be putting cases before the corrupt Larry Rogers Jr., who will continue to vote along with George Cardenas to give tax cuts to rich property owners. Ed Burke is a convicted criminal, and he's going to be allowed to go and practice law as a convicted criminal. I don't think that there is another case that we could point to of a convicted felon that it is allowed to practice law. Now, the Attorney Registrations Disciplinary Commission took up this petition. Now, keep in mind, it is the Illinois Supreme Court that controls the ARDC. But the ARDC brought this petition before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that 4 of its attorneys, there are 4 of its justices, there's 3 of them that are from Cook County. That would be P. Scott Neville. That would be Justice Joy Cunningham. I forget the third justice's name. So 4 of them, again, we probably will never find out their names unless somebody leaks it out. I hope that they do, that we find it out. But we should send a message. We should go to the polls, and we should, as a protest vote Joy Cunningham out, because I can all but certain wager that she is one of the 4. That she's one of the 4 that recuse themselves from hearing the petition to suspend a convicted felon, Edward Burke, the former alderman of the 14th Ward, the longest serving alderman at the city council, which means he's probably the longest corrupt alderman on the city council now that he has been convicted of 13 of the 14 counts of racketeering to enrich his law firm from his office. You cannot make this up. You cannot make this up. But you and I, we have got to get busy mobilizing our people together. We have got to take control of our politics. We can no longer stand by. I implore us that we can allow now the highest court in the state of Illinois, the highest court in the state of Illinois, are complicit with protecting a criminal, a known convicted criminal. The Illinois Supreme Court is protecting this criminal. They have given cover to them. This is clout 2.0. You know, there's not a single other person who would be granted that kind of privilege to be convicted in a federal court of a grand jury bringing 14 indictments. They heard evidence and they brought 14 indictments against this now convicted criminal whose wife was a Supreme Court judge, whose wife decided to retire. That was never telegraphed, so she decided to retire. Maybe because she knew that her husband was going to be convicted and she didn't want to be on the bench at the time that her husband was convicted. Who knows? I'm glad she's off the court. She recused herself. She recused herself From the red light camera case that was up, that was argued by Keating, who was an attorney that brought this case before the Illinois State Supreme Court. And they heard the case. And there was a 3-2 vote. But because they didn't have a quorum, it went back down to whatever the lower court's decision. And of course, that was politics at its finest as well. I'm saying to you that we have got to do something about this. We've got to do something about this. We've got to contact everybody that you know. Make sure that you send this information, that you send this link. I'm going to put it up on Facebook, on all of my social media outlets. Share it. Get it to your friends. We cannot allow for this to go unanswered. We cannot allow for the Supreme Court to think that they can do this and that there is no consequences for it. Well, there are consequences because this is an election. And the consequences would be is not to send the person back to that office who is up for election. And that is Joy Cunningham. So I would implore you, vote for the other candidate. Vote for Jesse Reyes as a protest vote against the members of the Illinois State Supreme Court. That's what you and I can do. We can send a resounding message to them that we are not going to sit idly by and allow for you, the Illinois State Supreme Court, to stick your thumb of injustice in our eyes, because that is what they're doing by giving a criminal cover. They have totally lost credibility, completely lost credibility. They're just a notch, maybe just a notch, maybe just a notch. I don't know that I would say that they're a notch higher, but I would put them right there as a lack of confidence with the United States Supreme Court. So we don't have Supreme Courts of impartiality anymore. We just don't have it. We do not have Supreme Courts of impartiality. I'm having some technical issues here. We don't have that. We absolutely don't have it. But you and I can do something about it. You and I can do something about it. I'm having a little technical problems, but that's okay. What's more important is we have got to say to them, this cannot stand. The level of corruption that we're finding within the body of government, when we find that it has happened, we've got to do something about it. This man is convicted of 13 or 14 federal counts. And here it is, the Supreme Court gives him cover by saying, we know that you're convicted of a crime, but we're going to let you go out and we're going to let you continue to make millions and millions of dollars by putting tax appeals before the Board of Review, the Board of Review granting those tax cuts to you on behalf of your clients, and you can saddle those tax cuts on the backs of homeowners on the south side and the south suburbs for your clients. You can't make it up. You cannot make this up. So I need to ask you, how many of you will get on your social media outlets? How many of you will get on the phone? How many of you will reach out to your networks and get them to give a protest vote? Maybe they were going to vote for Justice Cunningham, But I suggest that we send a message to the Illinois State Supreme Court and tell the Illinois State Supreme Court and tell the entire state that we're not going to tolerate this as citizens. Nobody convicted of a crime, nobody convicted of a crime should be practicing law in the state of Illinois. He's convicted of 13 of 14 counts. He is a criminal, and he's allowed to practice law. That we cannot accept. We should not accept it. Where is our insult level? We cannot allow for this to stand. We have these gatekeepers of certain people who commit crime, and this man has been committing crimes and getting away with it for decades. Be easy for people to start talking about gangbangers and all of that sort of thing. Put him under the jail. But here is a thug in a pinstripe suit that we paid thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars, millions, over the decades of being in office. He's made multi of millions of dollars as a result of being in that office. And we find that in making that, he's been committing crimes and doing it now that he has had a trial and he's been found guilty by a jury of his peers of 13 of the 14 counts. It goes to the Illinois Supreme Court by who are the overseers, the Independent Disciplinary Commission, which is known as the ARDC. So whenever you have a complaint about an attorney who may be representing you or misrepresenting you, it's the ARDC that you file a complaint with. And the ARDC, no attorney wants to hear from the ARDC. It's not good for their records. But here you have the ARDC. That's the agency that is the watchdog of attorneys. They go to the Illinois State Supreme Court, file a petition to hold a jurist accountable for their misdeeds. And the Illinois Supreme Court says, no, we're not going to hear it. We're not going to hold just or criminally convicted felon Ed Burke accountable. This is the highest court in the state of Illinois that essentially has said that we're not going to hold him accountable. This is astonishing to me, of the revelations and the more and more of corrupt revelations that we are finding. Now it's Ed Burke, who's been criminally convicted, who gets to go and practice law and continue practicing law with his conviction. John Poulos, a notorious police officer that killed two young, unarmed Black men, one coming out of his, John Poulos was coming out of one of his family-owned bar with his relative's firearm in the dark of night, and says that he saw someone up on a third floor balcony in the dark, breaking in to an apartment. Now, mind you, there was no 911 calls before or after that reporting any disturbances or any attempted break-ins or any burglaries, not one. So he created a 911 on his own, and he ended up shooting and killing an unarmed black young man because he says he claimed he saw something shiny that he thought was a gun, and the only thing that the young man had that was shiny on his wrist was his watch. When he was put on leave, when he came back from leave, less than 1 week back from leave, he claims he sees a young man who fit the description of someone who was wanted sitting at a bus stop, chases the young man, shoots and kills a young man, shot him in the back, claims that the young man pointed a gun at him. They never found a gun. Mysteriously, 4 months later, someone in the same area said that there was a gun in their backyard mysteriously 4 or 5 months later, and they attributed that gun to the young man. But this notorious John Poulos, this notorious killer of 2 young black men, was never held to account, never brought before a court. So I can't use the M word, but they died at his hands from him shooting and killing them. 2 unarmed black men, one in less than a week coming off of leave. This person is now running to become a Cook County judge. This person should be nowhere near a judge's bench except for being on trial, which he should have been, but that never happened. Even the police officers that were the so-called investigators of his actions, they were later found guilty of corruption. And now we have a criminally convicted felon who the Supreme Court said, don't worry, we'll just recuse ourselves and we can't hear it. The other justices can't hear it because the majority of the justices have recused themselves, so they can't take up the measure, can't take up the petition. So the Illinois Supreme Court says to the arm of the ARDC that they control, we don't need to take it up. Don't bother bringing it forward because we're not going to do it. We're not going to take Ed Burke's license from him. We're going to allow for him to continue to make millions of dollars before he gets sentenced so that he can make sure that he has more millions if he ends up going to jail. They may not even send him to jail because of his age. They may call that cruel and unusual punishment because of his age. He may not go to jail. He may do house arrest. He may do the same thing that they did with Ed Vrdolyak. They may put him on house arrest. He may never see the inside of a cell. If the highest court in the land could say to a convicted felon, we got your back. The highest court in the state of Illinois saying to a convicted felon, we got your back. Don't worry. We're not going to take up the measure so you can keep practicing. You can't make this stuff up. I say to you, go to the polls, tell your friends, vote for the other candidate. vote for the other candidate. Let's send a resounding protest to the Illinois State Supreme Court and to every other elected office. Vote for the other candidate and say to the one there, we are not going to allow for you to slap us in the face and basically abdicate your sworn duty. We can't trust you. We can't trust her. We can't trust the one that's up for election, nor can we trust the others. There's nothing we could do about the other ones, but we have the opportunity to do something about one of them and to send a message to them that we're not going to accept this. So I'm saying to you, go to the polls, vote for the other candidate. Jesse Reyes is running against Joy Cunningham. I was going to vote to support. No, I wasn't. I was voting to support Jesse Reyes anyway. That's who I'm endorsing. To go against the establishment, not going, I'm a Democrat, but we have some bad Democrats that we need to get rid of and replace them with some better and different Democrats. That's what we have to do. I'm saying to you, let's replace Joy Cunningham with a different Democrat. Put Jesse Reyes there as a protest. Even if you weren't going to do it as a protest vote. Let's mobilize and send a message, a resounding message to all of them. I guarantee you, if we do this, they all will get the message. They all will get the message. All right. Join me on this Thursday. Join me on this Thursday. What I'd like to ask you to do is, if you have not attended a 10 by 10 to win meeting, by Zoom, we do it by Zoom. I'm going to put it in the chat text, 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. All right, so you can get in the text alert. And what we will do is then you'll receive the text alert on Thursday morning with the Zoom link. Come to the meeting. Typically, our Thursday night meetings are strictly about organizing and mobilizing. And that's where we're going to do it. But I'm going to highlight this. We need to mobilize around this. We need to send a message to the Illinois Supreme Court that what they did is unconscionable. They have completely tarnished the integrity, what little integrity they had, of the Supreme Court. Let's send a message to them that we will not tolerate this. There's something we can do. Ordinarily, we wouldn't be able to do anything. Like, we can't go petition for the removal of the Supreme Court justices. Who's going to do that? They would have to be impeached. And that's certainly not going to happen at the General Assembly. Not going to happen. The highest court in the state said to a convicted felon, you can keep your license and keep practicing, even though you're a convicted criminal, you can keep practicing law. We need to shut that down. Well, you can't shut it down, but what you can do is you can send a message to them that we're not going to go along with it. We're not going to let you get away with it. Elect Jesse Reyes as a protest against what the Supreme Court has done, to say that a convicted felon, as long as his name is Ed Burke, can keep his license, can keep practicing law, can keep earning millions of dollars, can keep earning millions of dollars, even though you're a convicted felon. You can keep doing that as a protest vote. All right, you all. That's it. I had to come on and talk about that tonight. I don't know if you knew about it, but I had to make sure that we put the information out there about it. Let's do the protest vote, and let's say to the Illinois Supreme Court, we are not with what you are doing. And what we will do is we will eliminate at least one of those justices that recuse themselves from taking up that measure. Now, they will never acknowledge or admit to that, but we know that Justice Joy Cunningham, who was hand-picked replacement by the outgoing Ann Burke to replace her, no way that anybody would convince me that she is not one of the ones that recuse herself from listening to the petition to suspend Ed Burke, the federally convicted felon. All right, you all. Until the next time, go out and put that protest vote in. I'll see you all the next time, okay? Can't believe this is happening.